When you manage procurement for multiple facilities, every order matters. But when it's for a hospital system, they matter even more. Grainger gets it and knows there's no time for managing multiple suppliers and no room for shipping delays. That's why Grainger offers millions of products in fast, dependable delivery, so you can keep your facility stocked, safe, and running smoothly. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
It is Ryan Seacrest here. There was a recent social media trend which consisted of flying on a plane with no music, no movies, no entertainment. But a better trend would be going to ChumbaCasino.com. It's like having a mini social casino in your pocket. Chumba Casino has over 100 online casino-style games, all absolutely free. It's the most fun you can have online and on a plane. So grab your free welcome bonus now at ChumbaCasino.com. Sponsored by Chumba Casino.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
I'm a nobody from nowhere that ain't never done nothing. That's what I am. An old head. These young coaches, I tell you what, I can't figure these jokers out. They got a backpack on and tight something. I don't know what they're doing. They're getting on my nerves. I can tell you that. I know what ain't in the backpack. A string and a let me paint that line for you. That ain't in there. That's for sure. I had a kid the other day. He said, "Hey, Coach, didn't Christopher Columbus write the Pledge of Allegiance?" I said, "He sure did. He also played quarterback for the 1985 Chicago Bears." He said, "Bet." That happened. Sun Coaches, Season 6, where coaches come and tell their stories. Some of them are funny. Some of them is going to help you in your coaching journey. Not everybody has a funny story, but everybody has a story. Hope you enjoy Sun Coaches, brought to you by Titan Sensor. Sun Coaches is proud to partner with Titan Sensor for Season 6 and 7. Titan is made in the USA, proudly founded and based in Texas. When you connect with Titan, you are not alone. You can collaborate and share templates with other coaches across the country to build reports and foster competition. Used by programs such as State 6A, Georgia State Champion, Grayson High School, Titan can tailor a package to fit your needs. The eye in the sky never lies. Improve your team's performance with Titan. Welcome to Sun Coaches Podcast, Season 6, and today I'm fired up to be joined by the head coach at Sprayberry, Coach Dr. Pete Fominaya. Thanks for being on with us.
Coach, thanks for having me.
I should have said Dr. Coach, but
yeah,
it came out Coach. Doctor. But
yeah, I appreciate that.
You earned that degree, so by God, I would make at least the English teachers call me Dr. Fominaya.
Yeah, funny story about that. I had my folks, education was critical of my folks. And I'm the second person in my family graduated from high school. So that I grew up in this blue collar family where you were gonna go to school and you were gonna do your best. And I'd finished my specialist and I called my dad to say, "Hey, I finished this. What do you think?" And he's like, "Well, when are you starting your doctorate?" And I was kind of like, "Man, like, you never even been to college. What do you mean when I'm going to finish my doctorate?" And he said, "Well, son, like, I didn't raise you to do things halfway. If you're going to do it, go all the way." And I said, "All right." So kind of did some research and started writing my doctorate. And, it was something I'm really proud of.
Oh, that's awesome. So speaking of which, where did you grow up?
Well, Coach, I'm originally from Florida. I was born in Miami, but I moved to Naples, which is 2 hours south of Tampa on the West Coast. If you follow I-75 from Atlanta, 10 hours south, you'll be in Naples, Florida. It was a great town to kind of grow up in, small little beach town when I was there. Now it's a big vacation spot. But when I was there, it was a small little town with 3 high schools, and it was a good place to grow up.
So which high school did you go to?
So Barron Collier High School, the county's named Collier County. So the high school was named after the guy who founded the county, Barron Collier, and him and Henry Ford, they kind of developed the railroads that went through there in the old days, and so the high school was named Barron Collier, and I was there as a freshman and as a sophomore, and then my junior year, they opened the first high school in 20 years in the town, and that was Gulf Coast High School, and the seniors could stay at their home school, but the juniors had to go. The freshmen, the sophomores, and the juniors. So I opened Gulf Coast High School and ended up graduating from there.
So what all did you play in high school?
Well, Coach, I've been a tall kid my whole life, so I thought I was going to be this great basketball player growing up. And when I got to Barron Collier High School, there was a coach named Dan Cox, and Coach Cox said to me, "Hey, you need to play football." And I said, "Well, Coach, I'm a basketball player." And he goes, "Listen, just come out and try it." And he poured into me a ton as my position coach and my offensive line coach, and got me to come out to play O line and D line. And then when I got to Gulf Coast High School, another position coach that really poured into me, Coach Mark Ivy, who is now the linebackers coach at Louisville. He was like, "Well, if you want to be a really good football player, you need to be a wrestler." So he got me out for wrestling, and so when I finished high school, I was a football player and a wrestler, and those sports taught me a lot about myself and who I wanted to be.
Well, did you get an opportunity to play at the next level?
I did. I was first team captain and first person to go play college football from my high school. Being a newer school, there was a lot of firsts in those first couple of years. So I got to go to Elmhurst College, which is now Elmhurst University. It's right outside the city in Chicago, and I got to go play 4 years up there, and it was a great experience for me.
So what position did you play in college?
So that's a funny story. I went as a defensive lineman, and we're going into my sophomore year, and I'm kind of battling for an inside spot at the 3 technique, and I get that knock at the door late at night for bed check during fall camp, and my head coach is standing there, and he said, "Hey, we're kind of down a few guys at this position. Would you mind making the change over to offensive line?" So I said, "Coach, I didn't come this far from home not to play. I'll do whatever the team needs me to do." So I ended up moving to the O-line and started there for 3 years, and we were able to. The school hadn't had a lot of winning, small college, and by my senior year, we had the first winning season, and in 20 some years, and something I'm still really proud of.
Well, let me ask you this. How was your first Chicago winter being a South Florida kid?
So it was, the first time it snowed, my first winter in Chicago, we got 20 inches of snow.
Good.
And yeah, it was, I've never seen snow before. To be honest with you, I hadn't really left the Southeast. We didn't have a whole lot of money growing up. So like our vacations were driving to Pigeon Forge or going up to DC or something like that. We never, like Rock City was about as much as I'd ever seen growing up. And, when the first time I got to see snow, we all ran out there and played in the snow and had a good time in the snow. And then after that, it got old quick. We walking to class in that and going to workouts in that. I told myself, I said, when I graduate, I'm heading back down south. So that I did my 4 years up there and then started heading back.
Yeah, my wife's family's from upstate New York, right outside of Rochester, and we went up there for Christmas one year, and I was like, "Oh, this snow is awesome!" And they're like, "How long are you gonna be here?" And we were like 5 days, and they said, let's revisit this conversation in a couple of days." And you're right, the novelty had worn off, and I was like, "How do you people live in this? This is awful."
Yeah, there's no doubt, especially when you got to play in it, and you've never experienced like it. Like I know Chicago is called the Windy City because of politics and this and that, but it's the Windy City because it blows right through you. Like it'll cut you in half in the wintertime. And, I learned quickly, what long sleeve shirts were and gloves and, putting tape over your ear holes and things like that. Like you learn some of them tricks real fast.
I imagine the kids from up north gave y'all a hard time about
They did,
not
you
being
know.
able to deal with the elements. And you're like, well, I tell you what, big boy, you
That's
come down
right.
here and get some of this humidity.
Yeah, you know, and there wasn't any small schools in Florida in those days. In the 90s, you know, there wasn't anybody, you know, any small programs like there are now all through Florida and the Southeast. So like a lot of kids in Florida had to go to the Midwest to go play college football. So when I got to school, there was 25 of us from Florida. Now, only 6 of us graduated, but you know, there was a ton of kids that were kind of coming up through the small recruiting fairs, and once they got that first taste of winter, most of them were heading back quick.
So when you went off to college, did you know you wanted to teach and coach, or did you just get in the wrong line when they signed up for Majors Day? Or
Yeah, well, like I said earlier, I come from a blue collar family. You know, my dad was a truck driver. He owned a tree business, and we kind of rode all over South Florida, you know, picking up trees, delivering trees for different landscaping companies and things like that. My mom kind of did it all. She was a cafeteria worker, bus driver, worked in the bank, whatever she could do for us to kind of make it. I'm the oldest of 4, and you know, I remember sitting in the semi one day with my dad, and you know, summers in the truck, like, you know, my dad was kind of on the cheap side too. We didn't have no air conditioning inside that truck, so we'd be sitting there and we'd both be sweating our tails off. And I kind of looked at him and said, you know, I called my dad Pop. I said, Pop, like when you were a kid, did you want to grow up to be a truck driver? And he said to me, well, son, to be honest with you, I wanted to be a teacher and a coach. You know, just life worked out the way it did, and this is what we got to do to provide. And you know, that always kind of stayed with me. And you know, part of my story is I get to college and I got no blueprint. You know, my folks hadn't gone to school. I'm the oldest, so I don't have an older sibling to kind of tell me what to do. So I get in the locker room and I start asking guys, hey, you know, what are you majoring in? What are you guys studying? And you know, in Chicago with finance and the way it is, everybody was a business major. So I decided I'm going to be a business major too, and you know, start studying business. And but being a coach and a teacher was always kind of in the back of my mind.
so when you got out of school, what was your first job out of Elmhurst?
Yep. So my wife and I met my wife in school, and she's seen all sides of it, right? She saw me as a player, she saw me as an assistant, and you know, she's been with me since I became a head coach. So we decided we're going to move to Fort Lauderdale, Florida, down in Broward County, and I take a sales job, coach, and in Deerfield Beach, Florida, which is on the north side of Fort Lauderdale. And you know, I got my suit on and I'm going into work, and it was miserable. From the time I got there to the time I walked out the door, I thought to myself, like, I cannot do this. Like, this is not what God's called me to do. Like, I'm doing the wrong thing. And I'm driving home down the Sawgrass Expressway, which runs through Fort Lauderdale, and it's got to be late July, early August, and I see a high school off the interstate practicing. You know, so if you can imagine, you know, like when you're driving down 75 where you can see Lowndes or Crisp or one of those schools, I just kind of decided to pull off the highway. And I'm wearing a suit, and I get out of my car and I just stand in the back of the end zone watching practice. And this gentleman walks up to me and says, hey, can we help you? You know, what's going on here? And I said, well, you know, are y'all looking for any coaches? And he said, well, wait 1 second. I'll call the head coach. And the head coach was a guy by the name of Elliot Bonner. And this was at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School, which got famous years down the road. They had that big shooting down there. Coach Bonner walks up to me and says, hey, can I help you? And like I said, you looking for any coaches? And he said, well, do you have a degree? And I said, yes, sir, I have a degree. And in the early 2000s, there was such a shortage of teachers in Florida. You know, the state was growing so fast that if you had a degree, they could get you certified pretty quick. And he said, well, come to my office tomorrow. And I was subbing by the end of the week, and I was teaching by the end of the month, and was able to come in and coach. And and really kind of establish myself.
Tyler Reddick here from 2311 Racing. Another checkered flag for the books. Time to celebrate with Chumba. Jump in at ChumbaCasino.com. Let's Chumba.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. See T&Cs. 21 plus. Sponsored by Chumba Casino.
That first year.
So what was your first, like, what did you do? Were you a JV coach? Were you a middle school coach? Or were you a position coach?
So
what did you do?
So I was a JV coach to start out with. But a lot of the JV coaches in Florida, like on Friday nights, they go do whatever they want to do. I walked into the varsity staff and I said, hey, whatever y'all need, I can do on Fridays. So it started out as a scout. I go out and go look at the next week's opponent or a big district game. And then it turned into helping out in the box. And then by the end of the season, I was on the field trying to help, the varsity coaches, whether it was with personnel or whatever it was, and really learned how to cut my teeth, as a young coach, helping out in the weight room and being wherever they needed me to do. If I had to be the laundry guy, I did the laundry guy. If we had to go paint the practice field, we had to go paint the practice field. But I wanted to just earn my stripes. I don't come from a coaching family. I didn't play at a big school. So I just wanted to prove to guys that I was willing to do whatever it took.
That's awesome. So how long were you there?
Well, that off season, we have some turnover in the staff. And Coach Bonner walks up to me and goes, hey, we want to promote you to a varsity spot. And I said, man, this is great. I'd love to just learn and get better. And he said, well, some of the coaches are going down to the University of Miami next week for a clinic. Why don't y'all go down to the University of Miami with those guys? So I said, great. This is early 2000s. Miami's still kind of in their heyday, where they're competing for championships and winning championships. I said, I'd love to go down there. So we go down there on Friday and we watch practice, and it's my first clinic experience. And, I'm on cloud nine, just being around all those coaches and getting to learn ball. So I kind of looked at the itinerary for the next day, and I said, hey, there's this guy named Bill Kramer who's speaking tomorrow morning. He's the head coach at Naples High School. When I was in high school, they were terrible, but now they've played for 2 state championships in 3 years. Like, we need to go hear this guy in the morning. What time we getting back? And they said to me, well, we ain't coming back. Like, it's Friday night. We're going out, and we ain't coming back. And I said, man, we got to hear this guy. Like, when I played Naples High, we beat them by 50. And now they're playing for state titles. Like, we've got to hear what he's doing. And they said, well, you're on your own. So I got up the next morning, 23 years old, and 8 a.m. I was sitting in the front row trying to get better and trying to learn. And when I heard Coach Kramer speak and what they were doing at Naples High, I said, man, that's the right way to do it. And I need to kind of be a part of this. So we got to talking after the clinic, and he said, well, why don't you come by next week and maybe you can join our staff. And I said, Coach, that'd be great. It's my hometown. It's Naples. And I just wanted to kind of get better. I wanted to be around a bunch of guys that wanted to compete and do things the right way. And I decided that was a road I needed to go. So I went and told my head coach where I was at, Coach Bonner, that I was going to go over there and interview. And I drove over there and interviewed, and they offered me the varsity D-line coach job. And as I was walking out of the field house, or not the field house, but the coach's office, Coach Kramer stopped me and he said, hey, do you want to be a head coach one day? And I said, well, yes, sir. I think I would. He said, well, if you're willing to work, I'll teach you. And I said, yes, sir. And that kind of became my goal and my mindset when I got to Naples High, that I was going to try to be the best coach I could, and I could try to learn from him and just take anything away that I could from that program.
So how long did you stay with Coach Kramer at Naples?
So I got to Naples, and the staff had been together for a while. Coach Crone was with Coach Kramer there for 20 years. Sam Dollar, who was our defensive coordinator, he had been there 20 years. Coach Dollar's up here in Georgia now at Perry. But I came in as a young defensive coach and just try to absorb as much as I could from them. In 2006, we made a run to the third round and lost to the eventual state champs. In '07. We won the state championship 15-0. And then in '08, we made it to the third round again, and really was kind of at a position in my life where I wanted to grow. And like I said, Coach Horn had been on staff for a long time. He wasn't going anywhere. He was one of the coordinators. Coach Dollar had been there a long time, and he wasn't going anywhere. And I needed to. I just kind of felt like it was time for me to kind of take the next step. And I met with Coach Kramer and just kind of told him that I felt that I was ready to take the next move, and kind of went and interviewed for some coordinator jobs. And after meeting with some of those other coaches, and this is no offense to those guys, I decided I couldn't work for anybody after I'd worked for Coach Kramer. Coach Kramer had won over 250 games, had won multiple state championships. He's in the state of Florida Hall of Fame and now the National Hall of Fame, and he had really done it the right way. And he saw something in me that I didn't see in myself. Like he'd call me over for dinner and say, "Hey, why don't you bring you and Patty over to dinner to the house?" And I come over to dinner, and I get ready to walk in the house, and he'd say, "Well, where are you going?" And I said, "Aren't we having dinner?" He goes, "Yeah, we're going to the office first." And we'd come up to the office back in the days, when you had to go through filing cabinets to do paperwork. And we'd come up to the schoolhouse and check physicals and check insurance and check this and check that. So he was preparing me for all these moments that I've had as a head coach, even back then. When it was time for the banquet, I had to get there 3 hours early to set everything up and get all the awards ready. And, a lot of coaches would kind of say, "Man, what, he's just making you do busy work," but I think he was really trying to coach me and teach me, that the head coaching job, while it's glamorous at times, requires a lot of work, and a lot of work that goes unseen. And, that whole time I was with him, those 4 years, yeah, we won a lot of ball games, but he was preparing me that entire time to take the next step as a coach.
That's awesome. So what did you end up doing?
So Naples and Fort Myers are right next to each other. They are, North or Fort Myers, just kind of right up the road from Naples. I was reading in the paper, that just kind of dates me a little bit. The actual paper, not online, that Lehigh Senior High School, which is located in Fort Myers, the head coach has stepped down. And we had played against Lehigh when I was in high school, and we had kind of played against them a little bit when I was at Naples. And I said, "Man, they've always had really, really good players. And I would really like an opportunity to go do this." So, I didn't know how to get my name out there. I didn't know, being at Naples, and, that program carried a lot of weight in our community. But I didn't really know, how to kind of become a head coach. So I found out when they were going to play a varsity basketball game, and I drove up to Lehigh and had my resume and shirt and tie, and walked in and asked where the principal was, because I figured he'd probably be at a basketball game, at least a varsity game. And I gave him my resume, and I said, "I'd like to be your next head coach." And we came in the next week, and I interviewed, and he gave me the job at 27 years old. And Coach, I didn't even know what I didn't know in those days. I was so young and inexperienced, and I'd spent a little bit of time as a coordinator, but not much. But I knew that if we came in and put a foundation in, that we could have some success.
Well, it's like we say on here all the time, that sometimes the only way you can learn is by doing that. We can tell young coaches till we're blue in the face that they're not ready, or be careful or whatever. But really, the only way for you to gain most of the experience that you need, if you haven't had a great mentor like you had, was to just start drinking out of the fire hose. Just go ahead and jump in.
Yeah. And, it was in Florida, we play for districts and not regions. And, when I took the job at Lehigh, we ended up being in the same district with Naples. And, we start out kind of rough. My Lehigh is is a tough community. It is kind of rural. It is a low income community, but it is a community where kids really care about football. And if you show them how much you care, they will run through a wall for you. So we came in and we talked about getting the right kids on the bus. Like if they, Florida's notorious for transfers. So we told them, like, if y'all don't want to be here, if y'all don't want to do things the right way, then y'all can go, my best player was this kid named Larry Overstreet. And Larry was not doing things up to my expectations. So I brought him in and I printed out the mascots of 3 different schools. And I sat him down at the table and I said, Larry, I really want you to be a part of this team, but you're going to do things the right way from now on. I said, you see this school? And I pointed at the picture of one of the mascots. I said, what you're doing right now, they'll let you do what you're doing. This place will right here. So you see this school? And I pointed at the other picture. I said, this school right here, they'll also let you do what you're doing right now, but we won't let you do it right here. And then I pointed at the last school and kind of the same story goes on. I said, listen, son, if you want to stay, you're going to do things our way. If you don't want to stay, these other schools will be glad to have you. And at 27, coach, you're going to do it your way. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to learn by different things. But we talked about we want to get the right kids on the bus. And if we can get them all kind of pulling in the same direction. And, Rich Rod at West Virginia was using the hold the rope mantra. And that was our thing. Like we were all going to be pulling in the same direction. We were all going to be going the right way. And we kind of took off. We struggled coming out the gate. I think we lost our first 3 games. But then we went on to win, I think, 13 out of the next 14. And we end up beating Naples in the district championship game and end up going to the 3rd round of the playoffs. And, they'd had, I think, 2 winning seasons in school history before I got there. And there wasn't any magic sauce. Like we're going to play really good defense. We're going to run the football and we're going to love these kids. And that's what we did. We poured into a community and really loved those kids and did whatever it took. And those 3 years I was there, it was a really, really good time for me and my wife and for my family.
So after your 3 years, after your first head coaching job, so what was next?
So, like I said earlier, I'm the oldest of 4, and my brother is 16 years younger than I am. So I was a sophomore in high school, and my dad says, "Hey, we're fixing to have a family meeting." And my sister looks at me and says, what do you think this is going to be about? And I said, well, 16, maybe I'm getting a car or something, And my dad walks in and he goes, you're not getting a car, you're getting a brother. And I was kind of like, a brother? I'm a sophomore in high school. And my brother was born, and when I left for college, he was 2. And by the time I'm finishing at Lehigh, he's in middle school. And my mom says, well, your brother wants to play for you. And he'd always been around with me. Coach Cassidy, who was the head coach at Harrison, him and I were in staff together at Naples. And Mark, my brother, would just kind of follow us around all summer. My mom would drop him off and he would be around with us. And then when I got to Lehigh, he was the ball boy and kind of the unofficial mascot of the team, and was always just kind of around. And my mom calls me and says, hey, your brother wants to play for you, but he ain't going to play at Lehigh. It was at least 45 minutes to get up to Lehigh from where my folks lived. She goes, well, you got to figure something.
Hey, it's Bubba Wallace from 2311 Racing. You know what feels like forever? Sitting on a plane waiting for takeoff. Good thing I've got Chumba Casino. With daily boost and social casino games on tap, this is the kind of fun that makes time fly. Why not turbocharge your downtime? Play now at ChumbaCasino.com. Let's Chumba.
Sponsored by Chumba Casino. No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
Now, if not, he ain't going to play for you. And I said, all right, well, there's some jobs open back down in Naples, and I'll look into it. So at the time, my wife is pregnant with our first child. I've got 3 girls, and my first daughter's on the way. when that season ended. She was going to be born in December, and our season ended in November that year. And just kind of a lot on your plate, when that first child's on the way, and just when the season's over, you got to kind of decompress a little bit. But my alma mater, where I graduated from, Gulf Coast High School, was open, and the AD reached out to me and said, why haven't we heard from you yet? And I said, well, Coach, my daughter's going to be born any day now. Trying to give my wife some time here after the season. And he goes, well, whenever you're ready, you come meet with us. And I said, okay. So I get everything ready and I go down there and interview. And if Lehigh is socioeconomically the bottom of the barrel, like 90% free and reduced lunch, I think when I was at Lehigh, one season we had 2 cars on the team, 2 kids that actually drove to practice. Everybody else we were picking up or they were walking. Gulf Coast was the other extreme. It was a country club high school. My last year at Gulf Coast, I think my starting running back drove a Porsche and my wide receiver drove a Land Rover. So it was kind of 2 extremes, if you will. And it was, just different needs, right? Kids are kids. Like, it doesn't matter if you're at a poor school or at a rich school. Like, kids, they still seek discipline and structure. But it was definitely a different mindset. Like, I knew we couldn't get Gulf Coast turned around as quick because of the athletes and the personnel. We were kind of hemorrhaging kids at some of the other schools. So I took the Gulf Coast job in 2012. The principal was a guy by the name of Ken Fairbanks, and he was a Vietnam veteran. And, I got to be honest with you, when I went to interview for the job, I really didn't want it, because I knew it was going to be a ton of work. And I walked in with this, I've got a list of non-negotiables when I take a job. And I walked in with this crazy list of non-negotiables. And he said, Coach, he said yes to everything. And he's like, I know how important a good football program is to a high school. If you need those things to be successful here, we'll get them done. And he was a man of his word. Him and the AD that came in, and we were able to bring in a good staff. He was able to give us the things we needed, and we were able to have a lot of success there.
So how many years total were you at Gulf Coast?
So I was at Gulf Coast 7 years, I believe, and they'd never won a district title before. Never had really any success, if I'm being honest with you. There was kind of, when I was in high school, we made it to the playoffs, but we weren't a great football team. We just kind of made it in because everybody else was worse than we were. And then when I get there, we really talk about building a program, something that the community could be proud of. So we came in and really poured into that freshman class. Now it happens to be that was the class my brother was in. So I had known a lot of different kids that were on that football team, kind of growing up, that had played rec ball with my brother. So we kind of built it from the freshman team up and really focused on those younger kids. And by the time those kids were seniors, we had one of the first winning seasons in a long time. And then, the next year we ended up winning the first district title in school history, which was just something I'm super proud of. When my staff and I got there, like, people were like, you'll never get it done there. It's a baseball school, it's a golf school, it's a country club school. Y'all will never be good at football. And my goal was, I wanted kids. We got a little mall in my hometown. I wanted kids to walk through that mall with a Gulf Coast football shirt on and be proud of wearing that shirt. So it was something that I was really proud of and really special to me and my family.
So when you decided to leave home, where did that take you?
Well, I'd had a couple different opportunities to come to Georgia through those years. My buddy Josh Cassidy, like I talked about, we were at Naples, and he had made the move in 2010. Well, here it is, 2017, and I just hadn't made the move yet. So my there was a job down in South Georgia that kind of presented itself, and then there was a job in Gwinnett, and and my wife at the time was pregnant with our third child, and it just wasn't the right time to move. So my buddy Coach Cassidy, who was at Harrison High School at the time, he calls me and says, well, Hiram's open. And I said to him, Coach, I never even heard of Hiram. Like, where's Hiram? You know, said, well, it's in Paulding County, and we do 7-on-7 and stuff with them. And they've got some potential. You need to call and find out. So at the time, Andy Dorsey was the athletic director. He was the previous head coach, and two previous coaches removed. And I was able to get his phone number, and I called and I said, Coach, I'd love an opportunity to meet with you and talk to you. And I don't think he was real hip on talking to people that were from outside of the state. He kind of felt like there were some really good coaches in the area, and I said, Coach, just give me an opportunity, to sit down and talk to you. And if you don't like what you hear, we can just kind of move on. But after about 30 or 40 minutes, he decided to give me an interview, and I just so happened I was going to be in Atlanta that weekend. My brother played college football at Mount Union, and they were playing for the national championship up in Virginia. So we were fixing to drive through Atlanta on the way up there. So, God kind of lined everything up where I was going to be in the area in time to interview. And, everything kind of worked out the way it was supposed to. So we interviewed for the job in December of 2017, and we accepted the job on Christmas Day of 2017. So that was kind of the end of my Florida chapter and the beginning of my Georgia chapter.
So when you got to Hiram, was your goal or your idea was you were just going to move your plan, your program, what you would learn at Lehigh and at Gulf Coast, and just rinse and repeat?
Yeah, whether it was college, learning how to take a bad program and make it successful, whether it was at Lehigh or Gulf Coast, we've always believed that, we've got certain standards and expectations that we feel like we can bring into a program and try to make the biggest difference, and I got to Hiram, and we had one of those freaky blizzards right there in the beginning of January that comes through Atlanta every once in a while. And so I had a little bit of time on my hands, and I'm interviewing the current staff and trying to figure things out. And I get a call from Dean Fabrizio, and Dean and I had known each other from Florida. And he says, well, you got a DC? And I said, well, Coach, I kind of called my own defense down in Florida. And he said, well, Coach, this ain't Florida. Like you need to hire coordinators. You need to try to let people do their jobs. He goes, I think you need to meet with Andy Scott. And at the time, Coach Scott had just finished being the head coach of Kennesaw Mountain, and I brought him in, and we interviewed on a snow day over at the field house. And he was the first guy I hired to bring on staff there. And we had 3 really good years. And then I hired Clay McKnight, who had coached at one of my rival schools in Florida, and at Immokalee High School, which is right outside of Naples. Guys like Edrin James and guys like that had come out of Immokalee, and Coach McKnight had done a really good job there as the OC. So I was able to kind of bring him up and then add the guys that were already on staff. Guys like Umbre Brown was running my weight room, and guys like Stan Halbrooks, who had been on staff, and Ben Mount, some of the different guys, Troy Stone, and really build what I felt was a really strong staff. Now, I didn't know what I didn't know, Coach. Going into a region with Rome and Carrollton, and going into a region with Kell and the local county schools, that's baptism by fire right away. So you had to kind of come in there and learn how to do things at a higher level really quick. So that first year, we just talked about standards all the time. This is our standard. This is how we're going to do things. This is how we're going to go in the weight room. And some of those kids bought in, and some of those kids decided that they weren't going to do things our way. So we end up benching some kids and moving on from some kids and going younger in different positions. But I felt like we were better for it that next year. Year 2, we make the playoffs for the first time in 10 years. They hadn't been to the playoffs since Coach Dorsey was the head coach. And we make the playoffs, and we beat Southwest DeKalb, who was a 1 seed that year, and then we advanced to the second round. We got to go down there and play at Griffin, and we were pretty banged up at the time, and Griffin was just better than we were. But it was a ball game going into the fourth quarter, and we really felt like we had done what we were supposed to do. We had made the program better and gotten the kids to believe in what we were doing. So we made it to the second round, and going into that offseason, we've got a lot of good players coming back, and I feel really good about where we're at. And Coach Brown had left at the time to go be the defensive coordinator at New Manchester, and I was able to bring in a new strength coach, Coach Carmichael, and felt like we were going in the right direction as a program. And we get to March, and as everybody knows on here, everything gets locked down with the pandemic. And the Hiram community is a pretty unique community. It is pretty transient. There are not a whole lot of families left in the Hiram community that grew up wanting to be Hiram Hornets. You've got people that kind of overflow from the city, or overflow from Cobb, or overflow from Douglas, and it's there's some bigger homes, so you've got a lot of multi-generational people in one house. Like you'd have a kid who lives with his parents but also has got grandma in the house. You got a kid who's a renter. You got a kid who maybe doesn't have a whole lot of stability. So when the pandemic came, our school went from an enrollment of about 1,400 in seats to when we got back to school that fall, I think we had about 600-700 kids that decided to come back and be in the classrooms. And any coach that's on here knows, like when your kids are away from you, they're just not going to grow the way you need them to. They're not going to be in the weight room. They're not going to be running. They're not going to be doing the things that they would do if they were with you. So we end up coming back from that pandemic season, and we make the playoffs, but by sheer elimination. We end up being the 4 seed, and end up playing a really good New Manchester team that year. Just kind of, we were struggling as a team and as a program, but we knew we had a good group of young kids coming back, and we just, like I said, when we got the Gulf Coast, we really poured into those young kids and tried to keep them there. One of the pieces I hate right now about high school football is that you've got to do such a job of retaining your kids in your building. Like you got to make sure that you can keep yours and that you can keep growing those kids and developing them. So we really kind of put a plan together to get those kids, better and involved. And we played a lot. We played a couple as freshmen and played them all as sophomores. And then, as we got into their junior years, when we kind of got back on track as a program, we ended up going up to Calhoun and upsetting Calhoun when they were the number 1 team in the state. Really felt like our investment into those young kids had paid off. And, we followed that year up with a 9-win season at Hiram and ended up making it to the second round.
Tyler Reddick here from 2311 Racing. Another checkered flag for the books. Time to celebrate with Chumba. Jump in at ChumbaCasino.com. Let's Chumba.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. See T&Cs. 21+. Sponsored by Chumba Casino.
And losing to a good Jefferson team at Jefferson. And then last season, I finished my last year there. Lost in the first round, and just really felt like God was calling us for a change.
And that's when you took the Sprayberry job.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So, I got to be honest with you. I didn't come to Georgia with the intentions of jumping around. I don't interview for jobs. I don't apply for jobs. I've gotten some calls through the years and things like that. But, I like to kind of be where my feet are. I want to try to. My dad was big on, like leave places better than you found them. Whatever that might be. He always pushed me. If you're going to be a dang garbage man, you be the best garbage man you could be. So that's where I wanted to be. I wanted to kind of be where my feet were and make that program the best we could. And I think that it's got some great days ahead of it. But when the season was over, I just kind of felt like a change was coming. And I had always had my eye on Sprayberry, if I'm being honest with you. The previous head coach, his name's Coach Vavra. We'd had a pretty good relationship, and I would call over here and hey man, you looking for a freshman game? Or do you want to do 7-on-7? And people always say, well, why Sprayberry? And I say, why not? It's one of the oldest schools in Cobb County. It's got a lot of traditions. They've been playing football here since the 50s. You've got 2 and 3 generations of people that have played here and have gone to school here. There's a lot of pride in the Sprayberry community in this school. The alumni are really proud. So, when Coach Vavra was going to leave to go to his next school, I kind of reached out to him and I said, hey, just be honest with me. What is it? And he just kind of was, hey, this is a family decision, and the program's in a good place, and it's a really good spot. And I put my name in for it, and I was able to get the job.
So you'll be going into year 1 at Sprayberry.
Yes, sir. Year 1 this upcoming year.
So how did you attack spring? Is it different than your first time at Lehigh when you were 27 years old when you did spring, or have you come up with a magic way of doing it that fits you and your coaching staff, or is it different with each group?
Yeah, this place is different, because Sprayberry won 11 games last year and made it to the 3rd round of the playoffs, and they won a region championship here. Usually when I come into a place like we've got to coach effort right away, doing things right and doing things right in the weight room. Well, like that's not the case at a place that's won. When you walk into a situation like this, like these kids have been working hard. These kids have been coached. These kids know how to do things in the weight room, so our mindset was a little bit different when we came in here, as far as we're going to do things our way, but we're also not going to try to reinvent the wheel here. We're going to go in here and develop relationships, and we're going to go in here and really try to focus on fine-tuning kids, try to take a bad player and make them good, try to take a good player and make them great. And then we've got some great ones. We're trying to make them elite right now, whether it's, through physical and mental toughness, whether it's their commitments to one another as good teammates, so we jumped into the weight room right away, and that kind of led us into the spring. And, we're bringing in some different systems. We're pretty unique on offense. What we did at Hiram. We had I think you got to know your personnel, right? I said my brother played at Mount Union, and they won a lot of games at Mount Union, and he's on staff for me. He was on staff for me at Hiram, and he's on staff for me here at Sprayberry. And he said at Mount Union they talked about players, formations, plays, right? And he said that's how we got to build our offense. And even though he was young, I knew he had been in a successful program, and we kind of wanted to take note of that. So, my offensive coordinator and I at the time, we kind of sit down and said, who are our best players? What do we have an abundance of in this program, and how do we get those kids the ball to be successful? So we started kind of doing our research, and there was a lot of the things that they were doing at Rockmart that really intrigued me, with their hybrid gun wing tee. And we went down there to Dublin and to the Wing T Clinic and did some more research about what this might look like, in a spread kind of mindset. It's still Wing T principles, but you're in the gun or you're in the pistol, and so going into the spring, we'd had a lot of success with it at Hiram, one of the top scoring offenses in the state. So coming in here and introducing a bunch of kids that have been, traditional spread program to our system is a little different, and teaching the guys what we were going to do defensively. So we spent a lot of time focusing on, execution and alignment and learning how to practice fast. And we ended up not doing a spring game. We just kind of kept everything in house and really focused on us. And it was a really good spring for us.
Yeah, that's awesome. I was talking to Coach Dean at Berrien the other day, and his first head coaching job, and he decided to do the same thing. And I told him that I just believe that's the way to go your first year, just because you can focus on you can get all of your stuff in, plus you get those 2 scrimmage games in the fall to kind of tune up for the season going, instead of, oh, we want to showcase what we have. You might not.
Yep.
You might not
Well,
want to throw that out there yet, because they're still learning a new system. And in 8 days or 9 days or however many days you get for spring ball, it's just that's just not that could. I just don't see how that's a great
yeah.
idea.
Well, one of the biggest differences, in Florida, you get 20 days, which is crazy when you think about doing 20 days of spring football. But the standard was to do a spring game, so when I came up here, that was kind of what I knew, right? But I never had to do it in 10 days, and try to get a team ready to go, so we kind of met as a staff, and we had a couple different calls about trying to play a spring game, but we just kind of met as a staff, and we were going to let those track kids finish track season, and, anybody that might want to be coming out from the baseball team, but we were going to just worry about us, teach kids how we were going to practice now and how we were going to do things. And, I think there was a really good foundation by the previous staff. Like I said, Coach Vavra did an excellent job here, and I'm grateful to have this opportunity. But we were going to do things a little different, and I wanted the kids to kind of learn what that was going to look like as we went throughout the spring.
So what did June look like for you guys? Did you do the 3-day model or 4-day? How did you attack your first June at Sprayberry?
Yeah, so we Coach Kramer at Naples was 5 days a week. Okay. And I kind of learned doing that model, but in Florida, there wasn't a whole lot of individual in those days, Coach. Like, you'd come in and lift and you go for a run or whatever, and then you call it a day. Weight rooms in Florida aren't very big, so typically you have 2 or 3 different sessions, a morning, an afternoon, and an evening session just to get the kids there. So I kind of came up doing that 5-day-a-week model. Well, when I got to Georgia, meeting with Umbre and Andy Scott, some of the guys have been on staff, they had done the 4-day model at Hiram. So I just kind of kept that Monday through Thursday look about us. So then when I got here, we just kind of kept it the same way. We do Monday through Thursday. We're in the weight room. We go 2 different groups. We got the older kids come in a little bit earlier, and then the younger kids will come in a little bit later, and then we'll get on the field and do some work. And then we try to throw on Tuesdays. So we're here Monday through Thursday pretty much the entire summer.
So here comes July. You don't have to
Yep.
really transition too hard into the 4-day week, because that's what they're used to doing.
Yeah, so they had done that already here at Sprayberry. We're going to do an OTA at the end of the week. We're heading to the University of West Georgia for FCA camp. I'd done the FCA camp when I was down in Florida, and then the FCA had approached me when I got here, and they said, we'd like you to come to team camp. So next year will be year 8 for me going to University of West Georgia for team camp. And I know it's not the old wing T and D camp that a lot of the guys in the state of Georgia know at University of West Georgia, but we still get a lot of work. And, I think there's something about taking kid to a college campus, just talking about being in dorms and getting away for a little while. And, it's a burden, when you talk about financially, but I think there's a lot of value in getting kids away and getting some time to just really build relationships. So we're heading that way at the end of the week.
Well, and it's a FCA camp too, so they'll get some Jesus while they're there too, and that's not a bad thing either.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And so is that the only OTA you guys have in July?
No.
Or?
Yeah, that's the only one we have in July. We did one at the end of the month in June over at Hillgrove High School. Coach Deshaun puts on a good one with a lot of the local teams. So there was some really good competition there, and I feel like we got better. And that was really the first live bullets we'd seen, because we did inter squad in the spring, and, all we've been doing is 7-on-7. So that was the first time where the kids, got to understand what my expectations are for them, in a competition format, just kind of the effort, the tempo, the attention to detail. So that was a good learning moment for us. And now we're going into the second OTA, and, I'm hoping to see some progress from where we were a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, I love seeing the look on the kids' face. That first rack when
Yeah.
they're used to going against each other, and they may brother-in-law a little bit. You know, they're not always going, get after it 100,000% with each other. But when they're playing against somebody else that doesn't know them, doesn't care anything about them, and that look on their face like, oh, these guys they're for real. You're like, yeah, baby, they're for real. You better have your stuff together and be ready to go.
Well, and I said, on my interview committee, I asked them, I said, who are the best teams in this area? And, the guys were like, well, it's, the people in the committee, they were like, well, so-and-so and so-and-so. I said, why not Sprayberry? Like, why aren't we in that conversation? Like, there's enough talent in this building. There's enough talent in the history of this program to go do something really special. So that's kind of what I've turned and challenged the boys with. Like a good team, comes along every few years, but a great program, like the last names graduate, but the standard doesn't change. So I tell the boys, I said that season last year, that's last year's team's legacy. Like, what's your legacy going to be? What's this team going to look like? What are people going to remember y'all for? And I'm hoping that it's another great year that kind of builds on to a long run here. So that's really been kind of my challenge to them is to not be complacent, to not be kind of satisfied on what happened last season, but to take the next step as a program.
Coach, that's awesome. I can't wait to see what the Coach Fominaya Sprayberry Yellow Jackets look like this fall. You've had success everywhere you've been, done it the right way, learned from some of the greats, and I appreciate you coming on and sharing your story with us.
Well, Coach, I really appreciate this. When I reached out to you, I said that, I've learned a lot from this podcast and the different coaches that go on here, and I hope, my story is not a conventional one, right? I didn't graduate college trying to be a coach, but I hope that my journey can encourage some of them young coaches that are out there that are thinking about taking this road and, can kind of give some guys some positive feedback about what's possible if you just, work hard and get the right opportunities.
Absolutely, Coach. Well, I sure do appreciate you coming on and sharing that with us.
Coach, thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Hey, it's Bubba Wallace from 2311 Racing. You know what feels like forever? Sitting on a plane waiting for takeoff. Good thing I've got Chumba Casino. With daily boost and social casino games on tap, this is the kind of fun that makes time fly. Why not turbocharge your downtime? Play now at ChumbaCasino.com. Let's Chumba.
Sponsored by Chumba Casino. No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
If you work in university maintenance, Grainger considers you an MVP because your playbook ensures your arena is always ready for tip-off. And Grainger is your trusted partner, offering the products you need all in one place, from HVAC and plumbing supplies to lighting and more. And all delivered with plenty of time left on the clock, so your team always gets the win. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, visit Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.